I got another button.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, this one's much bigger.
Rick Lagina just did the unthinkable. Deep beneath Oak Island, after years of dead ends and traps, the sealed vault finally gave way. And what spilled out wasn't just treasure, it was something forbidden, something never meant to see daylight. You're not going to believe what they uncovered inside. Hit that like button and subscribe right now, because this discovery changes everything. Rick stood frozen at the threshold, his hands gripping ancient iron latches that hadn't moved for centuries. The ground seemed to pulse under his boots, the whole island resisting, as if aware of what was about to be unleashed. Dust hissed into the chamber as stone gears groaned awake, each movement echoing like thunder. Crew members exchanged nervous glances, whispering about curses and legends, their voices breaking under the weight of the moment. Then, with a final grinding shriek, the vault door cracked open, and a burst of golden light and shadowed relics spilled into view. Lanterns pushed back the darkness, revealing a scene straight out of myth. Strange chests carved with runes were stacked against the walls, their wood warped but intact. Scattered across the stone floor lay fragments of rusted weaponry, swords, spears, and shields, edges dulled, yet still carrying the threat of violence. At the center of it all, elevated like a sacred offering, stood a pedestal. Upon it rested a box, wrapped in corroded chains, heavy and ominous. Rick's voice broke the silence. This is what we've been chasing all these years. The crew could only stare, their awe mixing with fear, knowing they had crossed into forbidden ground. As the dust settled, more details emerged from the shadows. Cross-shaped engravings glimmered faintly in the lantern light, etched into the walls and relics alike. The markings matched stones the team had unearthed across Oak Island, repeating symbols tied to long-whispered theories. Some engravings seemed to chart sailing routes across the Atlantic, lines converging on the island itself. A half-buried knight's helm caught the light, rusted yet unmistakably medieval. Marty's voice cut through the silence, steady but urgent. "Rick, look at this. Everything we've found. It all points here." The first crates cracked apart under the crew's hands, wood splintering as if it had been waiting centuries to release what was trapped inside. Lantern beams caught the dull gleam of gold, not polished and modern, but heavy bricks, each stacked with impossible precision. Dust clung to their surfaces, muting their shine, yet the sheer weight of wealth radiated from the pile. Rick leaned closer and traced the strange emblem stamped into one of the ingots. It wasn't any minting mark from known kingdoms or empires. This was something older, perhaps a crest meant only for those initiated into its secret. The crew fell silent, the only sound, the echo of shifting coins and creaking timbers as another chest gave way. From torn leather satchels, spilled rings, twisted with archaic designs, gilded fragments that once belonged to crowns, and chalices whose rims still shimmered faintly in the flickering light. Each object seemed less like treasure and more like an artifact stolen from time itself. Yet it was what they found buried beneath that froze every man in place. A codex bound in cracked leather, its surface nearly black with age. Strange metallic studs held its cover shut, though one clasp had loosened enough to hint at the parchment within. Rick didn't let anyone touch it. His voice was firm, almost harsh. "This isn't gold. This is history. One tear, one mistake, and it's gone forever." As the crew steadied their nerves, Marty's lantern caught something deeper in the shadows. Against the rear wall stood a slab of stone, carved with precision far beyond the crude tools most would expect from the era. At first glance, it looked like another marker, but as the dirt was brushed aside, the Latin words emerged, non licet intrare. The translation struck them instantly. It is not permitted to enter. The phrase wasn't just a warning, it was a command. Above it, carvings revealed a chilling scene, figures kneeling before a sealed door, while looming shadows of sword-bearing guardians towered over them. The message was clear. This place wasn't just a vault for riches, it was sanctified ground, protected by oath and fear. As the team whispered their interpretations, something caught Rick's eye at the base of the slab. A skeletal hand, jutting from rubble, its bones yellowed, yet still gripping the hilt of a rusted dagger. Time hadn't loosened its grasp. The sight silenced the crew completely. For all their talk of treasure, of history, of glory, here was proof that at least one man had died to keep this place hidden. Whether he was a guard or a thief, none could say. But the implication gnawed at them. Were they intruders stepping into a tomb, rather than explorers uncovering treasure? Rick pressed forward, refusing to let the weight of superstition break him. He turned back to the pedestal at the vault's center, the chained box that dominated the chamber. Its corroded bindings seemed less like locks and more like restraints, meant to keep whatever was inside from ever seeing the world again. Together, Marty and Rick gripped the box's edges, the iron cold against their fingers, and lifted. The strain was immediate. It was far heavier than anything of its size had any right to be, as though its mass defied logic. Dust cascaded from the pedestal as it left its resting place, and when they lowered it to solid ground, the impact rang out like a drumbeat echoing through the stone chamber. The moment it touched the floor, a faint metallic hum filled the air. Not loud, not obvious, but enough to make the hairs on the back of their necks rise. The sound wasn't mechanical. It was resonant, as though the box itself had been forged with some hidden property that allowed it to sing under pressure. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, unsure if they were hearing the same thing or losing their grip on reality. Marty pressed his lantern closer, revealing an emblem burned into the box's surface. It wasn't etched nor painted. It was scorched deep into the metal itself. Rick froze. The design matched perfectly with a sigil he and Marty had seen years earlier, hidden on a weathered map uncovered in Spain, one long suspected of being tied to Templar voyages. The same angles, the same crest. Two discoveries separated by continents and centuries now tied together in one impossible artifact. He barely whispered, but his words carried across the chamber. This may be it. The Templar's final covenant chest. The box stood silent, its chains clinking faintly in the shifting air. Around it lay the gold, the relics, the warnings carved into stone. But all of it seemed to pale in comparison to the weight of this single chest. Even Rick, the man who had dedicated his life to Oak Island, felt a shiver of unease. He knew the vault held more than treasure. It held secrets waiting to be revealed to those daring enough to follow. Then, as the crew secured the last crate, a subtle shift in the chamber drew their attention. Dust tumbled from a corner of the vault, revealing the faint outline of a narrow stone corridor, long concealed by rubble and shadows. The air pulsed with the same energy that had accompanied the vault's opening, and anticipation prickled their skin. Slowly they cleared the debris, revealing the passage in its full, ominous length. Cold air swept from its mouth, sharp with brine and iron, carrying the unmistakable scent of something ancient and untamed, daring them to continue deeper. Rick's mind raced. Years of maps, theories, and whispered legends came flooding back. Could these tunnels truly lead directly to the sea, just as old documents suggested? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. Marty crouched beside him, lantern illuminating jagged walls carved with purpose, not randomness. The team debated quietly but urgently. Was this a discovery to document and preserve for experts, or a secret that demanded immediate exploration? Hesitation lingered only a moment. Rick took the first step, boots crunching against stone, centuries older than any of them, and the crew followed. In Oak Island, he knew, fortune favored only the bold. The corridor twisted and narrowed, walls slick with condensation, floor uneven and treacherous. Soon, the lanterns revealed the first relics of a civilization long thought distant from these shores. Amphorae, shaped in the classic Roman style, leaned against alcoves, some still sealed with clay stoppers, dust layered thick upon them. Broken shields and rusted helmets lay scattered, as if the guardians of this treasure had fallen long ago in silence. Marty's light reflected off etched bronze tablets, intricate designs depicting stars, constellations, and alignments that made little sense with modern astronomy. The significance was immediate. The chamber was more than a hiding place. It was a cosmic map, a bridge between worlds long forgotten. As they pressed further, small clusters of gold coins glinted from the dirt, their minting dates centuries before Columbus set sail. The metallic glint was hypnotic, yet the crew sensed something deeper. Each artifact, each shard of history, seemed to demand that their understanding of exploration, discovery, and civilization itself be rewritten. Even the air seemed to thrum with a weight that pressed upon the mind, whispering of long-forgotten journeys and civilizations that may have crossed oceans long before textbooks allowed. Every step carried a dual weight, the thrill of discovery and the realization that history might never be the same again. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them shuddered violently. Dust clouds erupted from every crevice, and loose stones tumbled from the ceiling. Panic rippled through the crew, shouts and cries echoing in the narrow confines of the tunnel. The vibration intensified as a section of the ceiling gave way, sending jagged rock crashing down and sealing the passage behind them. The sound was deafening, a roar of stone and earth that seemed to declare the vault's dominance over all who dared trespass. Some stepped back, fear etched in every line of their faces. But Rick's determination was unshakable. He shouted over the cacophony, rallying the crew to press forward. The vault was alive, it seemed, a breathing entity defending its secrets with collapsing stone and shifting walls. Every step became a negotiation with gravity and time. Loose rocks skittered underfoot, forcing careful placement with each stride. The walls, slick with moisture, reflected lantern light in unnatural ways, casting shadows that danced like sentinels along the passage. Every movement carried the sense that fortune came at a cost, a bargain between ambition and doom. Marty's hand grazed a bronze tablet embedded in the wall, sending a small cascade of dust and revealing inscriptions that glimmered faintly in the lantern glow. It was another clue, another piece of a puzzle, centuries in the making. The corridor opened slightly, leading into a larger chamber where the air grew colder, thicker, as if time itself had congealed within the stone walls. Here, remnants of past explorers' marks were visible, scratches and etchings left behind by those who dared to enter before, warnings or records of the unrelenting nature of Oak Island. Rick paused, taking in the evidence, and felt a shiver of recognition. This wasn't merely a passageway. It was a test, a gauntlet designed by architects or guardians who had long vanished yet whose presence was still palpable. Amphorae lined the walls in orderly chaos, some cracked, others remarkably intact. The rusted helmets reflected the dim light, and some bore insignias that hinted at alliances or allegiances lost to time. Marty examined the bronze tablets more closely, deciphering patterns that might correspond to celestial events or seasonal cycles. Their discoveries weren't merely terrestrial, they were cosmic, connecting Oak Island to a world of knowledge that predated maps, chronicles, and written history as they knew it. Every corner seemed to conceal another secret, another fragment of a story, incomplete yet tantalizingly vivid. Gold coins, long buried in dust and mud, glimmered faintly, as if acknowledging the intruders who had finally reached this chamber. The crew's excitement was tempered by the oppressive weight of the collapsed ceiling behind them. The passage had narrowed again, forcing each man to move cautiously, aware that one misstep could seal their path forward, or worse. Then came the unmistakable realization that the tunnel itself seemed to resist intrusion. Tiny tremors ran along the walls, and loose stones fell sporadically, forcing the men to work quickly but carefully. Rick's voice cut through the muffled sound of shifting rock. "Keep moving. We're too close to turn back now." The crew obeyed, stepping over fallen debris and ducking under low-hanging stones, each man's breath sharp in the confined space. Despite the danger, the discoveries only became richer. Patterns on bronze tablets began to correspond with the placement of the amphorae, suggesting some intentional astronomical or symbolic alignment. The realization that whoever built this chamber had considered both earthly and celestial order added a sense of awe and reverence to the fear pressing upon them. This was more than treasure. It was a record, a message in stone and metal spanning centuries, preserved for the few brave enough to confront it. Then, as if to remind them of the vault's dominion, another tremor shook the ground, louder than the first, a deep rumble that echoed through the entire corridor. Dust poured from cracks in the ceiling, obscuring vision and making every step a careful gamble. The crew pressed on, hearts pounding, each footfall a statement of courage against the crushing weight of history and the physical threats of the collapsing stone. The vault seemed alive, and every man knew that only those who dared continue would see what lay beyond. Through the settling dust and shadows, the corridor gradually widened, revealing the end of the winding passage. There, bathed in faint lantern light, the walls opened into a domed chamber unlike anything the crew had encountered before. Clay jars lined the floor, and shelves, their lids sealed tight with hardened clay, each one holding a tightly rolled scroll within. The air was thick with the musty scent of ancient parchment, but beneath it lingered something sharper, a tang of metal and brine that reminded them this place had not seen human hands in centuries. Rick stepped closer, lantern shaking slightly in his grip, and gently lifted one of the jars. The seal cracked with a faint pop, and the scroll within unfurled slowly, releasing centuries of trapped air. The parchment revealed maps of lands that stretched far across the Atlantic, outlines so precise they seemed impossible for the era. One map, meticulously detailed, depicted what appeared to be North America, centuries before Columbus is supposed to have set sail. The coastline was jagged, yet recognizable, rivers winding inland as though the mapmaker had walked its shores personally. Another scroll revealed a labyrinthine design, geometrically complex, hinting at hidden traps, false chambers, and secret tunnels that could easily mislead anyone daring to search Oak Island. Rick's breath caught. These scrolls, if they're authentic, this changes everything. The Templars may have reached America long before anyone knew it existed. The crew crowded around the maps, each man tracing lines and symbols with trembling fingers. Marty held a scroll against the lantern light, squinting at the faint, almost imperceptible notations along the edges. These weren't just coordinates. They were instructions, encoded messages that suggested the Templars had left more than treasure here. They had left knowledge, a record of journeys, guardians, and possibly a warning. Every eye in the chamber reflected awe and fear. They were holding pieces of a story that had been deliberately hidden from the world for centuries. But the maps were only part of the chamber's revelation. At its center stood a towering golden idol, solid and imposing, dominating the room with its sheer presence. The figure was unfamiliar, half-knight, half-mythical entity, its features crowned with a sunburst that seemed almost alive in the lantern light. Its eyes, cast deep in gold, appeared to follow the crew as they moved, an unsettling awareness embedded in metal. Around it, smaller treasures littered the pedestal, offerings of silver, bronze, and gemstones, seemingly placed in reverence to the central figure. The crew debated its origins in hushed tones. Was it Templar, Phoenician, or some even older civilization lost to history? Its design didn't fit any record they had seen, and yet it radiated purpose, authority, and warning all at once. Rick circled the statue carefully, noting the hollow cavity beneath its feet. Small coins, jewelry, and gilded fragments lay inside, almost as if the idol itself demanded tribute before granting passage or revealing further secrets. "This isn't just treasure," Rick said quietly, or threading his tone. "This is a guardian." The Templars, or whoever built this, they weren't hiding gold. They were protecting it, sending a message to anyone bold enough to uncover it. Every object in the chamber seemed to pulse with history and power. The scrolls promised knowledge, the gold whispered wealth, but the idol reminded them that the island had the final say. As the team worked to carefully remove the chest, coins, relics, and maps, the mechanisms within the vault began to groan, as if awakening from a long slumber. Walls shifted imperceptibly at first, then more aggressively, and dust rained down from cracks in the ceiling. The chamber itself seemed to reclaim its secrets, moving with the will of the island, a reminder that this place was alive and would tolerate no mistake. Rick and the crew navigated quickly but cautiously, gathering the treasures while keeping eyes on the unstable ceiling and shifting walls. Each step was calculated, every movement deliberate, as if the vault demanded both respect and speed. The gold, the codex, the scrolls, all treasures beyond imagination, were balanced against the danger that Oak Island posed, a gauntlet designed to test courage, intellect, and restraint. When at last they reached the outer corridor, the vault's mechanisms gave one final groan, walls moving like a giant exhale. Dust cascaded from the ceiling, swallowing lantern light in clouds that made every step feel heavier. The island seemed to breathe around them, reclaiming its forbidden chamber, as if ensuring that only the boldest would ever glimpse its heart. With the chest, maps, coins, and relics in hand, the crew moved quickly toward daylight, adrenaline pushing them forward, aware that the island had almost tested their resolve beyond measure. Rick paused at the vault's mouth, long enough to glance back. The door shifted ominously, grinding against stone, and then slammed shut with an authority that silenced the crew. Centuries of secrecy, preserved and defended, now sealed once again behind a wall of stone and shadow. For a moment, time seemed suspended, the crew holding its breath, knowing they had glimpsed something monumental, yet understanding that the greatest truths remained hidden just beyond reach. Even as they emerged into open air, lanterns swinging, hands clutching their prize, Rick's mind raced. Oak Island had spoken through stone, gold, and time itself. It had revealed enough to astonish, enough to tempt scholars, treasure hunters, and historians for generations. And yet, in that final slam of the vault, the island had also whispered that its deepest secrets, the ones that could rewrite history completely, were still buried, waiting for those patient, daring, and persistent enough to uncover them. The team's silence was heavy, each man absorbing the enormity of what they had accomplished. Gold and relics could be catalogued and displayed, maps could be studied, but the aura of the idol, the warning of the tomb, the labyrinthine designs, and the sheer ancient power of the vault itself were intangible. Oak Island had offered them a glimpse into the impossible, a treasure trove, both material and intellectual, yet it demanded respect above all. One wrong step, one lapse in judgment, and the island could claim them as it had claimed those before. Every coin, every scroll, every shard of gold seemed to hum faintly with centuries of secrets. Even as they carried the chest into daylight, Rick could feel the weight of history pressing down, not just the riches, but the legacy, the hidden knowledge, the echoes of lives lost protecting it. He knew Oak Island had given them a story that would reverberate far beyond their lifetimes, a tale of discovery, courage, and forbidden history that could never be fully contained in words alone. With each step back to the surface, the wind on their faces, the sun breaking through clouds above, the vault's final message lingered. The island had revealed enough to feed legends, to spark debates, to attract scholars and adventurers alike, but the heart of its mystery, the ultimate secret, remained hidden, secured behind stone and time, awaiting the next generation of seekers willing to pay the price. And though the chest, the maps, and the golden idol were now in their hands, the team understood something profound. Oak Island did not simply give up its treasures. It measured patience, respect, and daring, ensuring that its most guarded secrets were never entirely revealed. The vault had closed, yes, but the story it carried, the story they now held, was only the beginning, a new chapter in a centuries-long saga that had yet to reach its final, unimaginable revelation.